In our previous videos, we established how the foundation theory can explain different aspects of our reality. In this video, I'm going to go over how the foundation theory can explain the existence of morality. Let's begin. Now, the first thing is to understand moral experience. We can have certain experiences that are good and bad. Having good feelings or intuitions can help us in understanding the nature of the foundation. First, we can have experiences that feel good. This goodness is part of a larger dimension of reality, which we may call moral experiences. Your moral sense is a window into a moral landscape. So, when you sense good or bad, you can feel something about what is good or bad. Now, of course, our moral landscapes are not perfect. Our moral landscapes, however, can provide some insight into some type of morality. Now, if one tries to argue that we do not have a sense of morality, this will have many counterintuitive implications. The sense of torturing babies, for example, feels like it is wrong. But yet if there is no sense of moral badness, then torturing babies is not objectively wrong. However, this also has counterintuitive implications because it seems like torturing babies is wrong regardless of whether or not we believe it is wrong. And so there must be a sense in which there is a part of our moral landscape that allows us to sense what morality is. But on top of that this morality goes beyond mere senses. The hypothesis for why we have moral senses is what Jos Rasmussen calls the moral window hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, we have certain windows that allow us to sense morality. The moral window hypothesis makes sense of our moral language. When we speak about morality, it can help us in understanding why we call some things good and other things bad. Furthermore, it also avoids the other problems such as arbitrary preferences. If morality is a mere preference, then it is unclear why anybody should work to help others. In fact, we could solve all of the world's problems, like child hunger and racism, just by referring to those things. However, we don't ordinarily think about moral problems as if they can be solved without working to help others. We have a real sense that the problems others are facing are real, independently of what we might happen to refer to. Ordinarily thinking includes the thoughts that problems extend beyond one's own personal feelings. For example, when we see rape as wrong, we are not really thinking about preferences or ourselves. We are thinking that rape itself is a problem, even when we aren't around to think about it. Now, the first objection to the moral window hypothesis is that people have different moral opinions. And so if our moral sense is a window to a moral landscape, then why do people see different things? Well, the issue is that people have different experiences. Some aspects of our moral landscapes are harder to see. The positivity of pleasure and the negativity of pain, however, are far easier to see. The moral window hypothesis accounts for all these observations. Furthermore, the moral window hypothesis does not require that we see morality perfectly. The second objection is simply that moral sensations are an illusion. You'd sense the good and the bad, but yet they are not actually there. A good response to this is to simply point out that some moral experiences cannot be an illusion, because they involve direct awareness of good things from within yourself. When we experience a state of peace, we can then understand something positive about that experience. While some aspects require inferences, it does not follow that you cannot directly detect any aspects of the moral world. However, we can detect our own peaceful feelings, and you can compare peaceful feelings with painful feelings to see the difference in their positive and negative aspects. So in short, we can directly sense some of the good-making aspects from within ourselves. The third objection is that the moral sensations come from evolution, and so our sense of morality was naturally selected for over time to help us survive, but that it does not represent anything beyond that. A problem with this objection is that it misunderstands the point. It is right to point out that evolution can explain on some level the development of our moral sensations. However, this does not mean that senses of morality are therefore completely illusory. In fact, evolution could help us clarify about morality more generally. As we pointed out before, evolution was evidently fine-tuned in a specific way, and so there's nothing stopping evolution from being guided in a particular direction so that we can have moral sensations. The final objection is that we have no way to actually empirically verify whether there really is right or wrong. So, if factual statements are all verifiable by our five senses, and since moral statements are not verifiable through the body's five senses, then therefore, moral statements are not factual. The problem with this response is that verificationism is self-refuting. Verificationism is itself not verifiable through our senses. You cannot see with your eyes that factual statements cannot be moral. Verificationism fails to meet its own requirements for being factual, hence, verificationism cannot be factual. Furthermore, if verificationism is true, then the foundations of science, which include logic, probability theory, and growing branches of mathematics, all fail to be factual. Yet we understand the principles of math and logic by our sense of reason, not by our five senses. And so the moral landscape helps us in understanding our experiences of morality. Now we need an explanation as to why we have this moral landscape. I propose that the foundation of the world is the foundation of the moral landscape. The foundation of existence has a moral nature that provides the basic materials for the moral landscape. In other words, the moral landscape has a moral foundation. To begin to test this, we should consider what a moral foundation predicts. A moral foundation predicts certain things that flow from within its moral nature. The moral nature includes basic qualities like goodness, value, and the power to distinguish from right and wrong. A morally textured universe is just the sort of thing we may expect a moral foundation to create. Without a moral foundation, then, we have a problem. Non-moral materials do not predict any moral texture. If we suppose that the foundation is nothing but molecules in motion, then all you will ever have is molecules in motion, and so we have a construction problem when we try to build moral things from non-moral components. One objection to this idea is that evolution gave us our moral landscape. However, if we are talking about the foundation of reality, then you would still need to start off with a moral foundation. A foundation with a moral nature can explain the moral landscape. It predicts the existence of moral beings who can sense moral qualities, and it also predicts the existence of moral qualities themselves, since its nature includes the basic moral qualities. There are four things that the moral foundation can explain very well. The first is that the moral foundation can explain abstract moral principles. So, if there are moral Platonic forms out there, so to speak, then the foundation's moral nature is the abstract moral reality. The foundation includes, within its nature, principles of justice and virtue, and principles of well-being. All these things are grounded in the foundation. We can explain the moral principles within the order of the world. Those principles flow from the most basic aspects of the moral landscape. The moral foundation also has an advantage over the theory that there are abstract moral principles with no foundation. It can explain why there are beings like us who can know about moral principles, and it also has the resources to make a world with beings like us. Secondly, the moral foundation is the foundation of all the major moral theories, including consequentialism, contrarianism, constructivism, deontology, virtue ethics, natural law theory in all of its forms, universally preferable behavior, and all other secular theories of morality. These theories each provide a particular compass for navigating the moral landscape, while the moral foundation accounts for how there can be any moral landscape at all. A foundation lies underneath all of these theories. A moral foundation explains how any moral texture could ever exist anywhere, or why we can even begin to develop or recognize moral theories in the first place. Thirdly, people can know that something is good without knowing the ultimate source of goodness. This simply means that people can be good without actually understanding the ontological foundation for goodness. Finally, good and bad are asymmetric. Bad depends on good. In order to experience something bad, there must already be something good. For example, harming a person is bad precisely because a person has value, which is good. However, goodness does not necessarily depend on bad. Someone could experience the good qualities of well-being and peace without any badness, and thus goodness stands prior to all badness. The moral foundation would include something good within its nature, and since goodness is prior to badness, and since the foundation doesn't change and is eternal, then it must always have been good. A moral foundation has moral materials to allow it to paint a morally textured world. It also predicts that there are moral beings like us who can understand good and bad. Thus, the foundation theory can explain how morality is grounded. In the next video, we will be exploring how the foundation theory can explain the existence of reason itself.